There are over 4,000 active religions in the world today, and that isn't even counting ancient or extinct religions. Religious traditions have played a role in almost every culture around the world for thousands of years. There are so many varieties to these traditions that sometimes it can be difficult to wrap your head around the complicated concepts in every culture. So today I'm going to demonstrate to you some of these traditions with the help of 3 practitioners that were recorded on a podcast. First, I will talk about a Hindu practitioner, Swami Padmanabha. Secondly, I will walk through Buddhism with Dr. Heather Sanderson. Thirdly, we'll take a look at Judaism with Dr. Charles Breton. Then I will wrap everything up with a comparison between the 3 traditions that are vastly different in some areas and very similar in others. To understand these difficult concepts, I will apply a framework which consists of 3 questions. First, ultimate reality, or where do we come from? Second, way of life, or how are we to live in this world given the ultimate reality? Third, ultimate purpose, or where are we going? Our first podcast speaker is Swami Padmanabha, who was born into a Catholic family and at the age of 19 began a priestly monastic life through exploring the Hindu devotional called Vedanta. Then at the age of 28 he accepted the order of sannyas. Next, let's apply that framework I told you about earlier. What is Swami's ultimate reality? First, let's look at Hinduism as a whole. There are 2 major types of Hindu beliefs, monism and dualism. Monists believe that Brahman is supreme and encompasses everything. Dualists believe that there are deities that created them and they are to be worshipped. Swami says he believes the philosophy Bhed Abheda, which he describes as the idea that we have God and we also have the energies of God, the energetic source and its potencies. Both of them are inseparable, but at the same time we can talk about them in terms of different expressions like the sun and its rays. Now for way of life. As almost every other Hindu, Swami believes that everyone is in a cycle of reincarnation called samsara. According to Hindu beliefs, your next life is determined by the karma in this life. Hindus say if you are a human in this life, then your previous life must have had exceptional karma. Swami says, we already come into this particular life with a lot of different influences that are creating a sense of personality and that continue in this lifetime and so on until we are really able to identify ourselves for the ultimate spiritual designation beyond the temporary influences of this time, place, and material sphere. The ultimate goal of living your life as a Hindu is to be released from the endless cycle of samsara. This release is called moksha, and you can achieve this by doing your dharma or duty. The ultimate purpose is different for monists and dualists. For a monist, it is to be joined back to Brahman after achieving moksha. Dualists go to a heaven of one of the deities that they worshipped after moksha. Although Swami didn't explicitly mention what he believes happens after death, it is very likely that he believes one of these 2. Now let's look at what Dr. Sanderson has to say about Buddhism. Dr. Sanderson grew up part of the Christian faith, but as she focused on her academics and career, she started to look for alternatives to her birth tradition. She was then asked by a Buddhist friend of hers to come to a meditation group. After attending the group, she said, "Oh, this kind of felt like a new home for me." Dr. Sanderson has now been a practicing Buddhist for over 10 years. Now that we know a little of her backstory, let's look at her ultimate reality. Dr. Sanderson says, when referring to Buddhist practitioners, we don't get so caught up into where did I come from, how did this begin? We think more about what can I do now to change my course of action for my next life. She is referring to the cyclical idea of samsara and how to escape it. Buddha taught that there are 3 marks of existence: impermanence, suffering, and no self. That leads to the 4 noble truths, which are, suffering is inherent in life, the cause of suffering is desire. There is a way to put an end to desire and suffering, and that way is the Noble Eightfold Path. Now that we are at the Eightfold Path, we can talk about Dr. Sanderson's way of life. Just like with Hinduism, karma affects the next life and the cycle of samsara in Buddhism. In order to have good karma, Buddha taught his disciples to follow the Eightfold Path. A quote from the textbook says, in treading the Eightfold Path, one follows in the footsteps of the Buddha in eradicating attachment, aversion, and ignorance, putting an end to desire, and ultimately achieving enlightenment and nirvana, just as Buddha did. This is essentially the Buddhist's way of life, doing things that are ethical, mentally disciplined, and wise. For example, not hurting anyone, acting the right way, having self-compassion, etc. Now we can move on to ultimate purpose. The ultimate purpose for Buddhists is to become a Buddha. Buddhists also try to achieve nirvana. Nirvana moments are very temporary. Dr. Sanderson says nirvana is like an aha moment. Self-awareness becomes much greater. And then there's a peri-nirvana, which is the final passing into nirvana at the moment of your death. After achieving peri-nirvana, you are also free from the cyclical life and death of samsara. For the final practitioner, let's talk about Dr. Breton. Dr. Breton was born into a Jewish family and says, even though my parents are both Jewish, I consider myself a Jew by choice, which means that I'm not Jewish by default. When confronted with the 3 questions that we've been looking at so far, Dr. Breton gave a short answer for each and a long answer for each. The short answer for ultimate reality is created by God. The long answer, as Dr. Breton puts it, is the gist of it is that the only thing that is ever, always, and will ever exist is God. He also says it's through God's will and concern for the people that God created our world. Dr. Breton also says that according to Judaism, creation has not ended yet. This transitions perfectly into how we are supposed to live in this world. The short answer for way of life is live ethically. The long answer is, quote, we as human beings are in partnership with God in the act of completing creation, and Jews strive to live ethically according to the Torah while undertaking this task. The Torah has sections about our relationship with God, other people, ourselves, and the world. In all, these commands number 613. Since no one is perfect, you are not required to perfectly follow every command. However, you are commanded to try your best to follow every command. The short version of ultimate purpose is tikkun olam, or to repair the world. The long answer is, as Dr. Breton says, the first thing about tikkun olam is it has a goal. The goal of completing creation and repairing the world is to bring about what is in Judaism referred to as the end of days, or the world to come, where everything is perfect and complete and there is none of this suffering. He says Jews are very rooted in the present, but always praying about the future. Dr. Breton ends with a story. There's a certain king who challenged all the religious leaders that if they could explain the totality of their faith standing on one foot, he would convert his entire kingdom. Everyone refused to do it because they said it was impossible, including the other great sage at the time, Rabbi Shammai, who said it was impossible, I can't do it. But Rabbi Hillel said I can do it. So while standing on one foot, he explained the totality of the Torah as, what is hurtful to you, do not do to others. The rest is all commentary. Go learn. Now I'm going to compare these three traditions. The reason I picked these practitioners was because I felt like Hinduism and Buddhism are similar on some points, and that Judaism is quite different because of its Abrahamic origins. Let's look at them in terms of the three questions we've been using all along. The ultimate reality of Hinduism and Judaism are slightly alike because they are both worshipping something and have not transcended like Buddhism. Probably one of the biggest differences between the two and Judaism is the lack of rebirth in Judaism. Next, the way of life of Hinduism and Buddhism are similar when it comes to meditation, but then split from there. Hinduism tries to get free from samsara with dedication, Buddhism tries ridding yourself of suffering, Judaism tries to better the world through ethical action. Finally, the ultimate purpose. Both Hindus and Buddhists try to become free of samsara, but by different methods. Hindus by dharma, Buddhists by meditation to achieve nirvana and parinirvana. Jews strive to complete creation to bring about the world to come. Now let's compare the religions overall. Since Buddhism is derived from Hinduism, they both share a lot of the same ideas and vocabulary. They both share the idea of samsara and karma. Also, both use the word dharma, but for different reasons. In Hinduism, it means duty. In Buddhism, it means the teachings of the Buddha. They both also have practitioners of asceticism, which is severe self-discipline and avoidance of all forms of indulgence. Other than the same idea of meditation, that's about where the similarities stop. Here's a list comparing the different vocab. Next, the overall comparison of the Dharmic faiths to the Abrahamic faith. Judaism is much more of a strict tradition. To contrast this, here's a quote from the textbook. There are as many Hinduisms as there are Hindus. This speaks to the fact that Hinduism and Buddhism do have structure but are very open and fluid compared to the relatively strict and closed nature of Judaism. Even if we never practice these religious traditions ourselves, it can never hurt to learn about them to further our own beliefs and faith. Now that we went through the long journey of learning about these fascinating traditions, hopefully you are now a little more knowledgeable about them and maybe curious about the hundreds and thousands of others.